So, during the early 1900s, especially from 1904 to 1908, Namibia, then called German Southwest Africa, was under German colonial rule. The Herero and Nama people resisted German control, and when they rebelled, the German military responded with extreme violence. After the initial battles, the Germans forced thousands of Herero and Nama people into the desert, cutting off their access to water and food. Many died of dehydration and starvation. Those who survived were captured and sent to concentration camps. In these camps, people were subjected to forced labor, basically slavery, under brutal conditions. They worked in mines, on railroads, and in other harsh environments with very little food, poor shelter, and constant abuse. It's estimated that around 65,000 Herero and 10,000 Nama were killed, which was a huge portion of their populations. This genocide is one of the first of the 20th century and had long-term effects on Namibia's people and land. After the genocide officially ended around 1908, the trauma didn't. The survivors weren't just left to rebuild their lives. They were still under colonial control. Many had lost their land, families, culture, and economic independence. German settlers took over large swaths of land, and indigenous people were pushed into a system of racial segregation and economic exploitation that lasted until Namibia gained independence in 1990. The concentration camps, like the one on Shark Island, were especially horrific. People were forced to do backbreaking work like breaking rocks or building infrastructure with almost no food, while being constantly beaten and exposed to disease. Mortality rates were sky high. Some of the first human experiments in racial science were also carried out there. Skulls of victims were sent to Germany for so-called research. Germany finally acknowledged the genocide in 2016, and in 2021, they agreed to a financial aid package as a gesture of reconciliation. But a lot of people in Namibia, especially among the Herero and Nama descendants, feel the reparations fell short and are still fighting for justice. Yes, so after the genocide and forced labor era, resistance didn't disappear. It just changed form. The spirit of defiance lived on, even under extreme oppression. Over time, Namibians began organizing politically and culturally to reclaim their rights. By the mid-20th century, especially during the 1950s and 60s, Namibians started forming liberation movements. One of the most important was SWAPO, the Southwest Africa People's Organization. It started as a political group demanding independence from South African rule, which had taken over from the Germans after World War I. South Africa imposed apartheid-style policies on Namibia, and the fight for freedom got even harder. Eventually, SWAPO launched an armed struggle in the 1960s. That war for independence lasted more than 2 decades, with support from countries like Angola, the Soviet Union, and Cuba. The United Nations finally got involved, and after years of negotiations and international pressure, Namibia became independent in March of 1990. So, the road from genocide to independence was long and painful, but it's also a story of resilience. Despite everything, Namibians held onto their identity and fought back in every way they could. Since gaining independence in 1990, Namibia has made significant strides, but it's still dealing with the long shadow of colonialism. The country established a democratic government, and SWAPO has remained the dominant political party ever since. Economically, Namibia is rich in natural resources, like diamonds, uranium, and fish, but much of the wealth is still in the hands of a small elite. A lot of land is still owned by descendants of German and South African settlers, which has kept land reform at the center of national debates. The story of Namibia's land issue starts with colonialism. When Germany colonized the area, they took vast amounts of land from indigenous people, especially the Herero and Nama, and gave it to German settlers. After World War I, South Africa took control and continued that pattern under apartheid rule. By the time Namibia gained independence in 1990, most of the fertile land was still owned by white settlers or their descendants. This land wasn't just stolen, it was taken through violence, including during the genocide. So for the Herero and Nama, land isn't just about farming, it's about justice, dignity, and reclaiming what was taken through brutality. After independence, the Namibian government tried to fix this through a voluntary system, basically buying land from white owners and redistributing it. But it's been really slow and limited. Many communities still don't have access to land, and some are still living in poverty on land their ancestors once owned. The fight for land reform is still very active today. It's not just a political issue, it's a deep emotional and cultural one tied to history, identity, and healing. The Haro and Nama communities have been organizing for years, locally and internationally, to demand justice, recognition, and the return of their ancestral lands. They've held protests, formed advocacy groups, and pushed for direct negotiations with both the Namibian and German governments. One major step they took was filing a lawsuit in the United States in 2017. They sued Germany for reparations over the genocide, demanding that Germany include them in negotiations and offer direct compensation, not just aid through the Namibian government. Although the lawsuit was eventually dismissed on technical grounds, it raised global awareness and put pressure on Germany. At home in Namibia, leaders from Herero and Nama groups have been vocal about how land reform hasn't worked for them. They argue that the willing buyer, willing seller model is too slow and doesn't prioritize the communities who suffered the most. Some have called for expropriation, land to be returned without having to buy it back. They're also working to preserve and rebuild their culture, which colonialism tried to erase. That includes language, traditional practices, and storytelling that connects young people to their roots and reminds the world of what was lost and what still remains. In 2016, Germany officially acknowledged that what happened to the Herero and Nama between 1904 and 1908 was a genocide. That was a big step, but many people felt it came too late and didn't go far enough. Then, in 2021, Germany and Namibia announced a so-called reconciliation agreement. Germany pledged about 1.1 billion euros over 30 years, mostly in the form of development aid for projects in affected communities. But here's the thing. Germany still didn't call it reparations, and the money was to be managed by the Namibian government, not directly given to the Herero and Nama people. That sparked backlash. Many Herero and Nama leaders rejected the deal outright. They felt excluded from the negotiation process and said it didn't reflect the scale of the historical harm. They also argued that without land return and true reparations, where the word itself is used, the gesture felt more symbolic than transformative. Some called it a betrayal by their own government for not insisting on more. And to this day, Herero and Nama groups continue to push for a seat at the table, demanding direct restitution, inclusion, and respect. The awareness is growing because people are starting to see the bigger picture. It's not just about separate events. It's about a whole system where Europe and America built their wealth by exploiting African people and resources while keeping Africans out of the benefits. Thanks to social media, documentaries, books, and movements like Pan-Africanism and Black Lives Matter, this truth is harder to ignore. Reparations aren't just about money. They're about restoring what was taken: land, culture, identity, power, and the chance for African people to control their own futures. Leaders are probably watching closely to see how Traore's bold moves play out before jumping in themselves. Change like that can be risky, especially when it challenges long-standing ties with former colonial powers. Push hard against powerful interests often face serious threats. Staying alive and staying true to his vision takes courage and constant vigilance. It's a dangerous path, but if he can survive those early years, it might inspire others to follow.